Thanks for joining us today at UpGuard Summit. Our next guest speaker is Andrew Lawrence, CIO of Superloop. Andrew brings a wealth of experience in the technology industry and will be sharing both insights and practical thoughts around attack surface and third-party risk management. So let's get straight into it. Andrew, firstly, thank you so much for taking the time to be with us today. Could we start by learning a little bit more about your background and your role at Superloop?
Thanks, Aaron, and thank you for the invitation to be here today. I'm really looking forward to getting into some questions and sharing a little bit about how we use the platform and how it's been integrated into our vendor management processes. Yes, as you mentioned, I'm the CIO for Superloop. I've been here for 3 years now. My role at Superloop encompasses all the usual areas you'd expect. I look after all things IT, including desk-side services, so our internal IT teams, our enterprise systems team, who manage and maintain our private and our public cloud infrastructure, which, as you can expect, could be pretty significant, and our information security team, who definitely have their work cut out for them in the cybersecurity space, as they cover the whole of our business, and they're the primary users of the UpGuard platform. But I think they're big fans of the platform. They definitely say it makes their job a lot easier in a few different ways, some unexpected ways as well, but they're big fans.
You've definitely got a load on your plate there, Andrew. And for folks who haven't heard of Superloop, what does the company do? They have an interesting history in Australia. Could you talk a little bit about that?
We do have an interesting history. For those people who don't know much about Superloop, we're an Australian company. We're an international telecoms carrier. We're based out of Brisbane. The company itself is only 5 years old, so it's pretty young. We're an infrastructure provider in the true sense. So it means we do all sorts of things like we dig up the road to put fibre in the ground. We put wireless services up on towers all around the country. And we deploy subsea cable systems that connect countries together. On top of that infrastructure, we design and we build our own data networks as well. So those networks uplink things like the NBN in Australia, other major telcos, and then we carry that data off to places like Amazon and Google and Microsoft and Netflix. And not just in Australia, we do that in Australia, Hong Kong, and Singapore. So, we do all right for a small company. To explain, I guess, a little bit about why people might not have heard of us. Traditionally, we've been the carrier's carrier, if that makes sense. So we provide services to the bigger household names that you're more familiar with. We have grown quickly over sort of 5 years. I like to say sometimes that we're a 5-year-old company with a 20-year history. And that's mainly because we've brought together some really exciting companies over our time. We bring together some really smart and experienced people to do that as well. And they deliver those wholesale services as well as our own sort of residential services and business grade services as well. So we deliver residential NBN, we deliver business to business connectivity through our fixed line and our fixed wireless networks. We have products that deliver guest and in-room Wi-Fi as well for hotels, health sector and education campuses. And we also do student accommodation and hospitals as well. So in the school space, we actually also have a CyberHound brand as well, which is a cybersecurity product. It's very popular. It's an advanced cyber safety solution for schools, which is super effective. It's great for educators. It's great for the parents. And as you can imagine, it's pretty popular with the students as well. So we're pretty well rounded. We do a lot of things, but we do all right for a pretty small company.
Yeah, fantastic. Sounds like you got a lot on your plate. And what are the types of security challenges faced by a company like Superloop?
I guess we have the similar challenges to a lot of companies. I like to say, the 80-20 rule. Most companies have similar challenges. There's obviously some things that are pretty bespoke to a company like ours, but for the most part, we have similar challenges. We are an ASX-listed company, and we're a registered telecommunications company in Australia. So that means we have to adhere to some pretty strict compliances and regulations. There's, notably the Telco Act, which has some sections like the Telecommunications Sector Security Reforms, or the TSSR, which imposes some pretty strict obligations on us to protect our network and our facilities and to maintain appropriate supervision and control over all of our infrastructure, which is significant. Outside of legislative commitments, we understand that we're a key piece of the supply chain for our customers. We take that responsibility very seriously. I believe personally that fundamentally suppliers should be there to help you. So if by using a supplier that your cyber risk is disproportionately increased, and I feel like that's not quite right, and that supplier's not doing the thing that they should be doing for you. I think a supplier's risk profile itself, as an industry, needs to be much more accessible. We need to be able to see that. I think suppliers should be judged more publicly on those sorts of risks. I feel like if we were to do that across the board, that a rising tide would lift everybody up, and it would change that landscape a little bit. But speaking more personally, I guess for Superloop, we definitely spend a lot of our time and a lot of our energy making sure that we reduce our cyber risks and we reduce the cyber risks for our customers. We don't want to be there to increase their risk. We want to be there to decrease it. And as a technology company and as a young technology company, we feel like that's the right thing to be doing.
Yeah, fantastic. It's really good to hear that. And I know you do a lot of work in the platform as well. So now for one of the golden questions. So in your opinion, what would you suggest CIOs and CISOs consider from a security perspective? Is there anything obvious that we might be missing?
That's a good question. I'd have to say, CIOs and CISOs in the industry and security leaders or IT leaders definitely have their work cut out for them. I guess in large part because the interconnectedness of cloud services and SaaS services, they're growing exponentially every day. It seems like you find more and more, even when you think that's ended. They keep coming. When you combine the breadth of technology that's out there with the anytime, any device, anywhere style access that everyone is sort of demanding as the baseline these days, it really creates a perfect storm for data security. One of the key challenges, I guess, is vulnerability sort of management. It's visibility and it's measurement, really. So we have plenty of great engineers. We have plenty of good system engineers, network engineers, IT professionals. That they can fix issues as they come up. But the challenge is really measuring and responding to these issues as they come up in a really consistent way. One of the key use cases we have for the UpGuard platform is to make sure that we have that uniform way of measuring and reporting those risks, and giving that constant visibility and the constant measurement for reporting those risks, internally as well as for our suppliers as well.
Yeah, great. And how about monitoring of your third-party vendors? Obviously, a company like Superloop would have a ton of vendors. How do you monitor them from a cybersecurity perspective?
I think we do pretty well, actually. But we have over 80 vendors, and from the platform we have over 80 vendors monitored in the platform. And most people sort of get a little surprised when they hear me say that we have 80 SaaS vendors. But it's true, and honestly, if you go looking and you think about what's out there, then there's way more SaaS tools that you probably don't consider a vendor, and you just consider software. But they're all working with your data in some way, shape, or form, so they pose a risk of some sort. Obviously, some aren't as big as others, but you take Slack at one end of the spectrum, and maybe something like Grammarly at the other. They're both interacting with your data, so they both do pose a risk of some sort. We make sure at Superloop that we take careful attention and we catalog all those vendors, and we measure them and how they contribute to our overall risk profile.
Can you tell us a little bit more about how you use vendor risk?
Yeah, no worries. I guess it'll come as no surprise, but before we used the UpGuard platform, we were very heavy into the spreadsheet surveys backwards and forwards. The biggest challenge that we found with the surveys and the sort of sending the spreadsheets backwards and forwards to do assessments wasn't really the writing of the questions. They were pretty straightforward. It wasn't even getting the vendors to answer them, although sometimes that's quite a lengthy process. It was really digesting the information that came back and then being able to start a meaningful dialogue with some vendors about what that means and what we wanted to get out of the assessment. In some cases, that process just to get started takes a couple of weeks, and that slows the business down. If they come to you and say, hey, Andrew, we really need to onboard this vendor, and I have to delay them by 6 or 8 weeks because I want to send a spreadsheet around. That takes a long time, and it definitely doesn't enable us to move quickly, right? So, I'm happy to say that when we brought in the UpGuard platform, we got rid of the old process almost entirely. We still do send questionnaires if we need to, so it's not like we threw the baby out with the bathwater, but we use UpGuard as that common language platform to assess and monitor all of our vendors' cyber risks. And it is a tiered model, right? So, for example, if a customer has an UpGuard score of, say, 600 or lower, we're definitely in questionnaire territory, and we use the platform to send those questions backwards and forwards. But if a vendor comes in and let's say they've got, say, 700 as a score, and that we're sharing sensitive data with them, we'll go into the platform and we'll say, well, why aren't they at 900, for example? And we'll go look at those gaps. And then we have a discussion with them about those gaps. So, straight off the bat, instead of asking them a lot of baseline questions and figuring out what they're doing, we're asking them about gaps, having a mature conversation with them about what risks are still present, rather than, talking about the basics, which are covered off in a 700, page questionnaire. And I think, as we start seeing more and more as assessments come through, if a vendor is, say, they've got a really good score in UpGuard, so they're at 800 plus, they've got an ISO 27001 certification, and they've got a published questionnaire on the platform, our engagement with them is really short and it's really simple. It's just a straight conversation, talking about those gaps, talking about the areas that might need improvement, and then we're straight into monitoring mode as opposed to spending a lot of our time in that assessment mode. So, actually, that's one of the surprise features, I guess, of the platform that we weren't expecting when we signed up, was the concentration risk feature. So where we have 80 vendors and maybe 40 of those vendors are all using the same software, or they've got a supply chain sort of common touch point between all those vendors, which we find really interesting, and we use as part of that monitoring process for the vendors. So not just the initial assessment, but then into that monitoring process. And monitoring itself is, a really important part of the vendor management process. And it quite often gets overlooked because you spend so much of your time at the beginning of that engagement, sending those questionnaires backwards and forwards and finding out what the baseline is for a customer, or for a vendor, that you don't ever get a chance to graduate into monitoring mode. And monitoring mode, in my opinion, normally was reserved for the top end of town, and the top end of town were, have the people, they have the workforce behind that process, they can go and go through that. But I guess the feature that I like about the concentration risk piece, it means that we can be more proactive, right? We don't need to have that massive workforce behind us to be to go through and be proactive. We can let the tools do that work for us.
Awesome. Look, Andrew, it's really good to hear your insights and your thoughts today. We really appreciate you being with us. That was a really interesting session.
No problem. Anytime. Thanks for having me.
No worries.